All right, guys, welcome back. Episode 30 of the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. The much requested and long awaited episode. I don't know about you guys. I get hounded about when's the podcast coming back all the time. But we have all three of us have been just all over the country teaching and shooting, doing all the things for the last few months, and so it's difficult to get all three of us in the same place at the same time. But here we are. We finally got it back together, so I'm glad we're kicking off another episode. And this one is right on the cusp of we're getting ready to go into Carry Optics Nationals together, which should be fun. Hopefully, we can get together and do some stuff next week as well. But we're all kind of in the middle of training, get ready for that. So I'm sure that'll be a big topic of discussion. But update the people, y'all. What you been up to? What you working on? What's the latest?
Yeah, I've been working on nationals practice, believe it or not.
Yep.
Some pretty big things that I've been hitting on, especially like coming off of an injury. Like I just did like my right wrist. Like for you guys that are watching this, you can actually see it's still swollen right here on that extensor tendon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't exactly know how I did that. I kind of have a guess. Like back when it still hurt a lot. Like if I tried to scoop the gun out of the holster, I shoot a Walther steel frame that's heavy. I assume that is what hurt it. But that thing was like super sore to the point where like I couldn't even pick up my phone with that hand for like a week.
Yikes.
Yeah, like put on a brace, taught some classes. Kind of had to go shoot. Like during that time, there were some things where like the gun going off of my hands really hurt that wrist, and kind of felt myself like wanting to flinch a little bit when I started pulling the trigger. So I got back from those classes and basically just set the gun down for like 2 weeks. And like 2 weeks after that, which is basically like right now, I've picked up a lot more training in the last 2 weeks. I've modified some things with that draw to make it like not hurt as much. Basically, not attacking the gun on the draw like I used to, like as aggressively. Um, and at first, like I thought the draw was going to be, a whole lot slower, and I was like, well, I'll just live with it. The draw, I might not need a 0.6 draw at nationals, probably not, right? But I've modified some stuff like the way I attack it, and like with my support hands specifically. Like what I used to do is try to basically hit underneath the trigger guard with my support
Mm-hmm.
hand, and then kind of roll the gun out like that. But now what I've been doing is trying to catch the gun with the back of my hand. And what I find is like building it at the back up to the front. Actually, like I'm keeping the exact same amount of speed that I had before, and I'm getting a whole lot better grip, like a whole lot more consistent grip. Hands landing in the exact same spot every time. So
Hmm.
maybe the injury was a little bit of a blessing in disguise. So
Definitely interesting to mix things up sometimes. I had a guy in my class in California who had a variation of the scoop draw that I had never seen before and would have never thought would work at all. But man, it worked for him. So he's doing a pretty classic scoop draw, but his first point of contact on the gun is actually his pinky finger with the firing hand. So instead of driving the middle finger up under the trigger guard, he's actually sort of coming back and catching a certain spot on his grip with the pinky and then closing the rest of the grip up, which seems completely counterintuitive to me and would seem like he would have a very inconsistent grip.
Interesting.
But he sure enough had figured it out and was nailing it all the time. And I thought it was very impressive that he could do it that way. I certainly don't think I could. But yeah, it's interesting times the variations you come up with that you're like never would have thought that worked, but it does.
Yeah.
Does his hands start like forward of the gun more?
More forward. Yeah, it's more like
So he's kind of pulling his
a
hand back.
Justin type start position.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
For those
Yeah.
listening, what is that like? Adjust and start position.
So most people with the scoop draw obviously start with a hands at a wrist below belt start position. Your hand would be behind the gun and come forward into it. and he was just starting with his hand more in front of the gun and actually coming like back to it and catching that pinky in the bottom of the grip.
I see.
Yeah.
Someone
Very
told me
interesting.
that Isaac Lockwood catches it with his ring finger, and
Mm-hmm.
then like the middle finger kind of squishes into the bottom of the trigger guard. Kind of interesting, because he said he doesn't have any sort of tension when he does that because of how tight it inherently is. I don't know.
Yeah, that he has, I feel like, a lot of tension. But I've been meaning to. Actually, I want to have a conversation with him about that, because actually, like what I notice is that his, not only does it start that way, but a lot of times it just sort of ends that way. Like like his
Oh,
middle finger never actually closes all the way back, and sort of ends up like rolled forward a little bit, which of course contributes to the support hand sort of doing the same thing. So it's a fascinating grip that I've not seen anybody else use either, and I would love to get some more explanation from him on that. I noticed that as well. But yeah, interesting.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been working through, obviously, over the last year or so, a couple injuries as well. Had the support hand issue, which we've pretty much cleared up now. And then after, over the last month, really hitting some movement stuff, um, ended up with another irritated tendon, this time in my left Achilles tendon.
It's rough.
And man,
I've
I
had
think
that.
that the big the big takeaway from both of those, and really took this away from the support hand tendinopathy and into the Achilles, and it worked out the same way, is like everyone tells you to like rest the stuff as much as possible, and not stress it out and all that kind of stuff, and you just have to sit around and wait for it to get better, and it never seems to get better. And for me, just like actually working to strengthen whatever the irritated tendon is what has worked the best for me by far. As soon as I started like actually working out the tendon that was an issue for me in the support hand, it cleared up very, very rapidly. And so it took that straight into this time with the Achilles. I was like, yep, just gonna start doing calf raises every morning, and it cleared up like very, very quickly. Um, so exactly the opposite of what seems to be the common advice, but man, that's what's worked for me for sure.
I haven't had any shooting injuries yet, so knock on wood. But I mean, my elbow hurts like kind of all the time a little bit, but nothing like what you guys are talking about.
Do you even shoot, bro? That's crazy.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Don't even shoot.
Just demo. Welcome to the
Yeah,
club.
just demos. Never practice, never shoot matches,
Dude, that's awesome. Just practice your demos.
Yep, that's it.
I
That's
feel
the
like
key.
that's the majority of instructors anyway.
It is. It's actually a huge problem.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can do target transitions on your transition drill that you have in class, but you can't do them any other way. It's
Right.
like, ugh. Ooh.
Yeah.
Man, I partially like, obviously that's a problem, and you need to like take specific steps to not do that as an instructor. But I kind of get it from the standpoint of like, man, it's funny, I started tracking ammo because I got these new guns. And so I'm actually like specifically tracking round counts and like when springs wear out and so forth. Because I'm partially doing some, testing for Zev and so forth. And man, I got, in the 8 weeks after I got my new practice gun, I shot 8,000 rounds through it. And like 750 rounds of those were training. Like, like almost all of it was just shooting in classes. And it can be really hard. It definitely can when you're on the road all the time to actually make time for real training, but got to be intentional about it and get it in for sure.
Yeah, it's like you guys know, but it's like the 2-day turnaround at home, right? It's like it's like priority one is like wash your clothes, and getting to the range is sometimes a little bit farther down, being gone another day while you're at home. But
Well,
Yeah, I think that's been kind of the name of the game for me for practice, has just been like shorter, low round count sessions, trying to get the most out of it. I just took a class with Tim Herron, and
How was that?
it was good. It was really good. Tim's a really good instructor. I think his class is laid out really well. Definitely
Nice.
not a super advanced class like a lot of beginner competitors, like not really beginner shooters, I guess, but beginner competitors.
Mhm.
It's very good, very, very good for them. But not to say that I didn't get stuff out of it. So we talked quite a bit, and we kind of stayed at the same little lodging there on the range, but we ended up having a bunch of conversations, something that he started talking to me about that I think I'm going to start implementing into my training after nationals. So maybe kind of the exact opposite of what we're trying to talk about today. But he has something that he calls the rule of 10, which is essentially a way to figure out how to kind of push the speed mode side and the exploration mode side, as well as trying to harness the consistent on-demand performance that we're always looking for, right? And I think that's always been something that's been very separate for me. Like a training session has to be, exploration mode primarily, or execution mode primarily. And he's like, no, I'll do it in the same drill. And so
Mhm.
he has this rule of 10. I don't think you have to do it 10 times, but we use it as an example in class. And so essentially you set up a drill, whatever. We had like 6 paper and a piece of steel, right? And we were just shoot it left or right. And so the first 3 runs you score for hit factor, and essentially you're trying to score within 0.1 hit factor of each other. So you're just trying to shoot it extremely consistently, which means which I failed on, right? Because I like hit the steel on, a really fast transition to steel. And then the second one, I threw one at the steel trying to match the pace. And so I wasn't shooting, my sights, right? And so I was like, okay, so, and he was like, essentially, that's why you're not a GM. He was like, because you can't pull that consistency out on demand. He's like, that's still like a 50-50 thing for you. I was like, all right, like makes sense. So you shoot those first 3, you try to be as consistent as possible with the hit factor. The next 4 reps, you explore the speed, right? And not to like a crazy level, not to where you're like miking targets or something like that, but where you're accepting a bunch more Charlies. See how fast you can do that. And then just kind of average out, how fast can I pretty much get this done with less acceptable hits. And then the last 3 reps, you plug in that speed and you try to match the hits to that speed. And so generally then you end up finding that middle ground. And so I did that, and I was cutting about a second off of my time in the exploration mode. And then those last 4, I mean, my first runs, I think I had 1 Charlie each for every run. But the times were a little inconsistent. Knocked a second off my time for the exploration runs, and the last 3, it was 3 Charlies each, and consistently about well over half a second faster, right? Maybe no, I guess it was almost a second faster. So it was pretty interesting, kind of a way to explore like skill development, because something that I've kind of found with some of the last majors that I've shot, there's definitely a lot of skill development left on the table for me. It's not just like, hey, whatever skills you've got, right? Like you can go be like top 10 at this match we've got next week. Like it's not in the cards for me just based off of what I can do. But what so preparing for Nats for me has been, okay, well, harness everything you've got on board right now to put up your best performance. And, but I think coming out of Nats, it's going to be a lot of exploring what is possible again. Because, and I never really thought of doing that with more stage type stuff either, right? Like a lot of the exploration stuff for me in the past has been static stuff. So I think that's going to be interesting to just try to push the consistency and average stuff out, and get out of the PR mindset, which I'm just kind of always in, I think. And it's obviously super bad if you're trying to perform consistently at that level. It can kind of slowly go up, and your base level of consistent or performance can slowly follow your PRs. But I think it's probably not the most effective way to train if you're trying to just be able to tap into that on demand for a match. So I think that's how it's going to kind of change going forward. But I thought that was kind of an interesting takeaway from Tim.
So, out of curiosity, Brennan, why wouldn't you do that before nationals? Because Like that's basically how I've been training for nationals. Like I will push something not to the point where like I can't see, but like to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I'm like, okay, that's really freaking fast, and then
Mm-hmm.
try to make my eyes keep up, and then like I don't do it to like 10 times. Like I don't have a specific number, but like once I hit it, and then I see what it looks like, and more specifically what it feels like. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
trying to basically observe what everything looks like and feels like while I'm doing that, and then try to make my eyes keep up and see what it feels like, and then like try to trap. It's like, all right, that's what it is supposed to look like, and try to like harness that, and then
Mm-hmm.
make that my execution pace, so to speak. Like that has worked really, really good for me. Like
No,
execution pace after doing all that stuff is like, man, I'll set up a 24 round stage and maybe stick one Charlie.
I think it's a great strategy for preparing for nationals. It's just that I just got introduced to that specific thing like 3 days ago. So like for me, I've generally preparing for a match, like, I don't know, depending on how many practice sessions you get before the match, the last 6 to 8, like it's just practicing execution only. And so I think that's where it would differ. I would definitely bring a lot more of that in than what I have been doing.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. I think it depends a lot. Part of it obviously depends where you are, skill level wise as well. But to me, this is the exact same debate that people have as an example for like doing well on classifiers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay,
Yep.
well, there's lots of good shooters can go set up the classifier they're going to shoot this weekend, and they'll work on it and they'll figure it out, and they'll figure out what they need to do with their vision or like whatever your pet thing is, right? And they'll be nailing 20 GM runs in a row, right? And then they go to that match on Saturday and they shoot a C class run on that classifier. And it's like, okay, well, what what happened? And it's like, well, even though you figured it out or warmed up to the point where you could do a good run in practice the week before the match, did your cold on-demand performance actually get measurably better? And the answer to that is probably no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or
Correct.
not considerably, not with any level of consistency. So like, I think especially the closer you get to the point that Brennan's making, the closer you get to a big assessment, whether that's a qualification or whether that's a match or whatever it is. That's definitely where I tend to shift more towards shift away from skill development and the idea of I'm trying to learn how to get faster or more accurate the week before a match, and shift more towards, hey, let me just figure out how to get in the mindset where I can execute at 90% of my capability 10 times in a row without any like big mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of honing in that mental space really, and the focus and the planning and the memorization and the execution. That's definitely been my big focus the last couple weeks for sure.
Yeah.
I dig
And
it.
I just think it's important. Like, I think I have just swung both ways pretty hard in the past, right? Where it's like, I'm either
with,
just,
with
I'm
shooting.
just with shooting, right?
With
Yeah.
shooting. Yeah.
Like where I'll just be absolutely hammering the speed mode stuff. And it's just like, hey, I'm just trying to just figure out how to do something that I can't currently do. And then I think I've really tried to temper that maybe too much the other way. After training with like Eric the last couple of years, going,
Yep.
I really just need to work on my consistency, which is true. But at the same time, like I can go have the most consistent match of my life at one of these bigger majors, and like the performance isn't
It's
going
not
to be
gonna be
good
good enough.
enough.
Right.
Like I'm still going to be a second behind somebody or 2 seconds behind somebody. It's like, all right, well, he just shoots everything on the move, like, and I don't have that skill set on board yet, right? At least on demand, like the skill set is there. It's maybe 60% of the time I'll get it, right? And so that's where it's like, okay, the skill development needs to come back in, and I think every range session is an opportunity now, unless it's coming right up to the match, like you're saying, is an opportunity to do both. But then I think the average thing is cool because I don't usually average my runs. I'll usually just throw one at it, like an execution, be like, all right, yep, that's what I can do. But how do I know if that's what I can do consistently if I don't do it more than once. Right.
And
So,
I think the most interesting thing about like trying to be like, all right, how fast can I shoot consistently? Like the most interesting thing about that is just basically having to observe your shooting, right? Like you can't do the whole execution pace without having, have observed like, all right, how is the dot arriving on the target? How, what does it do when I press the trigger? Like all of that stuff, like all of that goes into, you know, how fast you can actually do it. Like Billy said, 90% of the time. And I think
mhm.
that's one thing that a lot of people lack in their training is just basically like when they go out and live fire, they don't really observe. They just like maybe stomp on the gas. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Maybe you do that every now and then. See what things look like at speed and stuff. But the observation piece, I think, is super duper important. Like if you want to know exactly where you are.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, to me that's huge. I mean, I think I've gone through a few different phases as I've been doing different practice and looking at different things the last few weeks. But like last week, as an example, I don't think I used a timer. I was on the range every day. I don't think I used a timer one day last week. Um, I mean, you can like I know we all do it, and you can use it as something to react to if you want. But again, wasn't trying to like break PRs or pay attention to like how fast the splits were or whatever. It's just like, hey, am I doing the thing properly? Like according to how I
Mm-hmm.
planned it. Like if I plan to shoot that target confirmation 1, 2, or 3, like is that actually what I waited for? Did I wait too long and shot confirmation 3 on a confirmation 1 target? Or like did I actually execute the plan the way I decided to do it? And that's essentially, kind of really all I was paying attention to, and don't really need a timer for that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, being able to pay attention and kind of self audit that stuff is huge for sure. I've been working some similar stuff. It's funny, an interesting version of what you're talking about, Brennan, I did last week with Tilly, and this is more in line, I think, with probably educating match pace, which is kind of the same concept, but more based upon score. In the sense of like what really is the optimal way to shoot a stage. So one of the things we did last week when I went up and spent a day with him shooting some stages is we would go on the stage and basically shoot a run or two or three at what would be like your normal match pace, kind of see what the results are there in terms of hits and time and hit factor and so forth. And then like on purpose try to shoot, an all alpha run. So like whatever's required, just shoot it all alphas. Um and notice there like okay, like where did I actually have to take more time? Where was it just like actually being more intentional? Like how many more points did I get and how much time was that actually worth and all that sort of thing. And then maybe do just a speed mode run like as fast as you can, basically you're still trying to get alphas, but if as fast as you can throw two on paper, shoot a run like that. And a lot of times the results were very interesting. And then it was like, okay, so from kind of the far ends of the spectrum and seeing your normal match mode, do you think like your normal match mode was correct, or should we make any changes? And it's, to me, this usually wasn't like anything in terms of like we need to change, how it feels across the board. Like across the board, we need to be more aggressive or more careful. But like in certain spots, it's like you would notice like, hey, was definitely giving up points on those close targets when there was absolutely no reason to do it whatsoever. Like we need to guarantee alphas in those targets, or hey, maybe on these kind of transitions or whatever, we can be a little bit more aggressive on these couple things or like whatever it was. Um, and I found that to be super interesting as well. Another interesting thing that we did there, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm always looking for ways. We're not all as lucky as Nick to have just like a full setup that just like stays all the time right by the house and so forth. So,
It doesn't
I
suck.
I I'm always trying to find ways. Like I feel like there's so many things. Like obviously, I wish, and even to grow from there, like I would love nothing more than to have like a range with like 10 bays that just have like stages set up all the time. You could just go shoot like full on stages all the time and just have like different things you can go through, and that would be great, right? There's learning that can happen there that doesn't happen from like a lot of the drills people do, obviously, on the range. But I also try to stay away from like getting to the range and spending 2 hours setting stuff up. So like, what is the happy medium there, and how do you bring in some of those stage skills into low resourced training? Great example of this that I picked up from Tilly. Obviously, working, I think, shooting on the move is very easy with fairly minimal resources. Also, working entries and exits is very easy with minimal resources. One of the things that I have struggled to train as well as I want to, though, is the really kind of tight, compact positional work that happens on stages a lot of times, where it's like, hey, as I'm shooting this target, like I'm not particularly shooting on the move, but I am like moving my feet to set me up for this like one step in transition over here to this port. And if I don't hit like that spot with my feet exactly, I'm going to be hunting for the target, that kind of a thing, that kind of really tight
Sounds
positional work. Yeah.
sounds like a dude who
Um,
shot at Go Shoot.
yeah. Right. Okay. Very good. Yes. Anyway, one of the things Tilly uses for that, which I have found to be brilliant, is shooting boxes. And this was really cool. So with a simple shooting box on the ground, you can like at a minimum have essentially 5 shooting areas. So obviously you've got a shooting area into the box, and then you can have one to the left of the box, right of the box, in front of the box, behind the box. And you can, with your setup, we did a handful of different ways. Like one of the things that's interesting to me is being like, hey, okay, I'm gonna shoot target like 1, 2, and 3 from the left side of the box, and then targets, target 4 from inside the box, and targets, 2 and 6 from the right side, and so forth, giving you those kind of tight movements. And I found it very interesting to almost like hold yourself accountable for actual like foot faults as if they are different training areas. Because a lot of times, if you don't move your feet quickly enough, like you'll be done with the transition, staring at your dot at the target, and you're waiting on your feet to get where they're supposed to be. And so, you can do that, flowing through. Like if you are just going like straight from the back to the front, shooting targets in the way, you can make it kind of a flow through. You can make it like, very 3 or 4 or 5 very clear, distinct positions. So even with just one box, you can get a lot of work there. But then also, if you have like 2 or 3 boxes on the range in different places, as in terms of different positions, and you're like, hey, I'm running up to the box, and again, like I'm entering in on a position that I've got to shoot these 2 targets on the left side of the box, then flowing into the middle, and then coming out the right side, and that kind of thing. So with a little bit of creativity, those those boxes I found to be very useful in terms of that like kind of tight positional work, and is really making you focus a lot on kind of exactly where your feet are going and stuff.
Are you
So
talking about like the boxes that we typically see at like a match? Like
yeah,
the
like a 3x3 box.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's super interesting. Super cool.
Yep. Yep.
It's kind of like an advanced version of bar hop, pretty much. But
hmm
you have
Yes.
5
Yeah.
positions
Bar
now
hop to
instead of
me gets
2.
like very boring very fast.
Yeah.
Like it's a great intro drill for sure.
hmm
But yeah, I found like you said, I found this to be a more interesting kind of higher level version of that.
But then
For
you're
sure.
also adding in 3 feet of space as well. So it's like you could say the
Correct.
first position is left side of the box, right side is, or second position is the right side of the box. And
Yes.
that's a completely different skill set because that's just not a crossover step. It's like, okay, now I have to actually move my feet, a little bit more while
Yeah,
still
and
trying
you
to
can.
game it so that your dot and your feet are landing at the same exact time. I dig that a lot. That's
Yep.
cool. That's very cool.
And you can make it. You can like again. It doesn't have to be like super positional like that. You can make it flowy. So like as simple as like, hey, I've got 2 pieces of steel downrange, like a wide transition between 2 pieces of steel. I'm going to shoot like the left steel from behind the box, right steel from in the box, left steel from like one shot each, right? Just as you're stepping, like 1, 2, 3, and then I'm coming back, and I'm doing it on the way back. So it can be kind of, shooting on the move ish as well, but not like walking. It's much more like a lot of the shooting that we actually do on stages where you're kind of hesitating halfway through a step and taking a shot, and then you're moving to the next spot and that kind of a thing. So yeah, a lot of interesting things you can do with it for sure. So I thought that might be interesting
Super
for folks.
cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
Because I feel like in matches too, like we'll see that based off of, like you were saying, like a port, right? Like it'll force the positions based off of barrels or walls or something like that. And so if you don't want to
Yes.
set those up, you can make your feet do something extremely specific as well, but like
Right.
literally just out in the open with open targets. That's
Yes.
very creative.
Yeah, because a lot of times, even with the vision barriers, uh, if you're always relying on your vision to actually steer you into the right position, you're behind the curve a lot of times because you're trying to steer yourself into a position you can't see while you're still shooting another target that's somewhere else.
Yep.
And so that awareness of like, hey, while I'm shooting, putting my feet somewhere that I can't look at, but they have to land in a very specific spot or it's not right, is an interesting thing to train for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
I got another one. Unless you guys got something that I think could be interesting for people. This
Yeah,
is
go ahead.
and this is something I've been doing a lot in classes, but I've been doing it to myself lately, and it sucks. So I don't necessarily have a great term for it, but I find borderline targets to be very interesting. So this is going to be different for every person, but like as an example, like a lot of us probably have a rough idea on, hey, if I'm shooting an open target, like at what distance do I need to switch from confirmation 2 to confirmation 3, that kind of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that a person is doing that at like 20 yards as an example. Well, if I put a target at 15 or I put one at 25, those are like very easy targets to engage properly. But if I put it at 20, it's actually very difficult to engage properly because you're going to feel like, hey, most of the time I can get away with a more aggressive level of confirmation. But if you actually do that, like sometimes you are going to get away with it, but you're actually going to suck a lot. So like in my classes all the time, I love putting, I flex it based upon the skill level of the class, but typically I'll be putting like mini poppers like right at 15 yards, and it just wrecks people's day because they feel like, this is an aggressive like confirmation 2 target
Mm-hmm.
all day long, no problem. And for most of the shooters, at the kind of class level, they're just spending the entire day like going miss to the next target and having to come back for makeup on that steal. And it's like, dude, like stop the dot in the middle. Right? And that to me is a great way to work the visual discipline piece. So like I think this applies to dry fire as well. Like again, a lot of people only dry fire, I think, on reduced size targets, like basically simulating very far targets
Mm-hmm.
in dry fire. And to me, like visual discipline there is easy. Like I do not struggle with visual discipline on a 35-yard partial. Like I just don't, because like you feel very comfortable taking all the time that you need to see what you need to see on that target because it's so difficult and so punishing, right? I will struggle with visual discipline on that 25-yard open target because I'm going to want to shred on that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
And so finding those distances where, especially on targets like that, maybe you struggle with, like maybe for guys that struggle on the steel, or whatever it is that you find yourself being too aggressive on, finding those distances where you want to be more aggressive than you can be consistently. Like when we're talking about find that execution mode training, um, don't make it easy. Like those borderline targets where you want to be more aggressive than you should. That's where you can actually work on the visual discipline and actually executing the confirmation level you plan to use. And it sucks a lot, but I find it very valuable.
I agree. Dude, when I set up like designated target in a class, I will always take an open target and put it at like 20 yards,
Mm-hmm.
15, 20-ish. And that is always the hardest one for everybody because they
Mm-hmm.
go, it's an open target. It's not that far away. And they just freaking send it. And it's
Yep.
usually like Charlie Mike when that
Mm-hmm.
happens. But I
Yep.
think same thing could be said for like if you set up the same drill, just as an example. Like if you had two open targets like right next to each other at like 5,
Yeah.
you will
Hmm.
certainly see some accuracy in inefficiencies at that distance as well, because you're trying to bounce your eyes back and forth, and like that is a very very fast like visual issue when you have two open targets that close together.
Yep. That was something I was doing a lot this week. I typically, obviously for this kind of match mode training, I'm obviously spending like most of my time outside of 15 yards. I typically will always have, one, 5, 6, 7 yard target in there as well that I hit, just to practice like actually throwing the throttle and being like as appropriately aggressive. And then of course, after you've been super aggressive on that close target, it's now even more difficult to like throw the throttle back the other way and be as careful as you need to be on the more challenging
Hmm.
targets. But like you were
Mm-hmm.
saying, I think what I've started doing the last few days is, having two of those like side by side every time that you have to hit.
Yeah.
It's a way better assessment of like your grip tensions and your visual discipline and all that stuff. Um, and yeah, it's sometimes the easiest targets are the ones that'll wreck you in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
For sure,
Yeah,
that's funny how that works
actually,
out.
dude, I did that today. Like I had two close, like maybe 5 yard targets, open targets
Hmm.
right next to each other, and it was
Yep.
the last position that I was getting into. And what I found was out of those three positions, if I kind of overran position 2 and needed to move a whole lot to hit position 3, it was like I felt like I was just waiting. Like basically, I'm looking at the target and I'm waiting for myself to get there, and I just felt a whole lot more tension. So like it was almost like it was a footwork problem, or it was a tension problem that was stemming from a footwork problem, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So like try not to overrun that position, so like I'm right there so I can see those targets really quickly, and then it's like, oh, I don't feel like I have to go fast, like it's right there and I can just hammer them.
Right.
So more things to pay attention to, I suppose.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that thing you were talking about, Billy, too, with like the distance change up, and like one of the things that plays into that for me is the speed of the transition as well. Like I
Hmm.
generally will tend to, like whatever the last target that I engaged was, that informs the speed of the transition. So like if I'm coming off of a difficult target, I tend to transition the gun a little bit slower onto the close target, and vice versa, kind of going the other way. Like I'll overdrive on the, going from a close target to a more difficult target, just because I'm kind of amped up. And I think it's important to like, okay, the transition speed should be the same. Like you should be moving that
Yep.
gun fast, but then just being able to put on the brakes or just be more visually disciplined to allow that to kind of naturally brake for you as you get into that target. That's super difficult for me to do. And I've been kind of watching back a bunch of my videos from practices and stuff, and I'm losing a metric shit ton of time on my transitions from stuff like that, and it's like, bro, you're just literally just dragging the gun to that new target. Like there's no urgency whatsoever. Right. And so that's something I've identified with that. It's like, yeah, that really helps set the pace, um, you know, physically. The thing I've been working on the most for just kind of match prep has been just shooting on the move. The last
Okay.
two majors that I've shot, three majors that I've shot. So I shot, let's see, or Space City, I guess, Ohio State, and or maybe it was just two. I guess those two. So like the last two majors that I've shot, man, like there have been so many chances where I was just like on the line of whether I should shoot that target on the move, right? And I think I've gotten into my head again, kind of with this throttle control idea of, well, it's got to be really worth it for me to shoot on the move. I need to be really, making up some serious ground. And generally, the easiest place to shoot on the move, it is like that, right? Like there's a fairly easy, fairly open target, and you're trying to cover a lot of ground pretty quick. So you can generally
Yep.
dial back the shooting, move your feet pretty fast, whatever, it sets you up, right? That's kind of like probably the first place people start shooting on the move at, when they start exploring stages and stuff. something that I've realized lately is like the amount of time it saves me just to roll through a position, even if it's slow, but I'm not starting and stopping anymore, is
Mm-hmm.
huge. Because, like, for me on the stop, I'm thinking so hard about just getting stable, getting into a good, planted, ideal shooting position that I'm absolutely just over confirming on the first shot on that target. Right. And so I've started just trying to like walk through stages and just shoot everything at a walking pace, do everything at like as fast as I can move. And then, again, then trying to find that balance. But then forcing myself specifically to, I'm just calling it like roll through or float through those control targets that I normally just feel like I have to stop for. I'm finding that everything except the very most difficult targets, with especially like a really difficult position, so where the target's maybe going to disappear, I don't really have to stop, right? And as long as I'm just carrying some momentum through, I'm really shaving off that time that it takes to plant and then start, right?
Yep.
So rolling stops through everything, that's been huge. And I think I've pretty much discounted that in the past because I just didn't feel like, well, if you're moving so slowly, like what advantage are you gaining? But
Mm-hmm.
when you string together, whatever it is, 12 targets that way, it's like, well, you're gaining the fact that you're not stopping and starting 11 times. Right.
Right.
So that's been a big focus of mine. All confirmation 2 and 3 targets. And just never stop moving, even if it's really slow, but just never stop moving. And the times I've been seeing like big old chunks of time come off of stuff that, it's been a very long time since I've seen that much time come off of my stage runs. And I'm not any
Yeah.
more athletic or faster than I used to be. It's just a different approach.
Yeah. People will really discount that. I love what I call the slow crawl, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not not like you said, not hauling ass. Like you're not
No.
necessarily need to be covering a whole lot of ground, but just maintaining, like you said, maintaining some momentum, but still covering ground even on those kind of intermediate to difficult targets. And you can almost, it's interestingly to me, like you've seen the way I teach this in class, but I like to say that like shooting on the move a lot of times buys you time to be more careful. Like it almost
Yeah.
it takes that pressure off. If your plan is like, man, I've got to stand here and I'm still and I can't be moving, so I've got to shoot all these targets and they're more aggressively, and then I got to like really run hard to this next spot. Like a lot of times that pressure to feel like you're going fast in the shooting part is obviously really builds, and you end up, even though you're standing still, like giving up points. And then all of a sudden you start shooting on the move, and it kind of takes that time pressure off a little bit, and you can just really kind of harvest alphas even though you're on the move. And a lot of people are shocked how well they can shoot um, in that kind of fashion. It'll be side note. It'll be very interesting to see um, the flavor of nationals this year. Uh, it la- was last year was your first Nats, Brennan?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so I mean, of the ones that I've shot, it was interesting because last year was probably the most rewarding I felt like of like running to a spot and shooting some stuff, and then running to another spot and shooting some
Yep.
stuff. Just because like if you were gonna shoot anything on the move coming into this position, it was gonna be like this crazy tight partial at like 20 yards or whatever, and the risk versus reward was just not there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and probably my biggest mistake last year was trying to force the match into my style of shooting, and trying to blend positions harder than I should have. I just saw, I'm sure you guys saw the email as well, the latest email from the practice score regarding the match had Yeeman and Todd Holmes listed as co-match directors. But I didn't know that Todd had anything to
Mm-hmm.
do with it. Um, but he's
Yep.
obviously the match director down at Belton, and ran South Carolina section and so forth this last year, which is one of my favorite matches for sure. So I'm very hopeful this year we'll have a bit of a different flavor
Yes.
um, on the match for sure, but
So
we'll see.
good upgrade they did to that range. So if you remember over in zone 1 and 2, Like on the left side of the like on the left side as you're looking at the bays, they had all those like wooden walls, and so we
Yep.
couldn't shoot into the walls, and so it was all like indoor stages practically. They have changed that, and so now they are putting hanging steel plates and ballistic rubber. So now there is a bunch of shooting like into the 180 into the sides, which
Love
is
that.
great. So
Yes.
when I shot Buckeye Blast a few weeks ago, that side of the range was, in my opinion, much better design stages than like Nats was.
Nice.
And there were a lot more places to like shoot on the move, because those stages at Nats were just like super crowded, like super crowded, tons of targets, but like you were saying, just a bunch of like shuffle steps over to a tiny little position. So I think it'll be quite a bit different this year, even though it's like all IPSC targets, no USPSA targets.
A lot of open targets.
I can't really believe that's going to be a thing.
What, the open targets or the IPSC
It
targets?
doesn't. IPSC targets.
I don't know.
Doesn't seem possible, but we'll see. I may or may not have been training. I've been training the last couple weeks on all IPSC targets just for fun.
For fun, he says.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll see. That would be a funny move for USPSA nationals to use all IPSC targets. It'd also be like it's almost like just being like, oh, we're gonna give Eric just even a little bit of an extra like hand up, like just,
Right?
as if he needs more advantage,
because he needs it so badly.
Right.
Predictions on who's taking the match. What do you guys got?
I'm hoping. I hope Christian wins, and I hope Christian wins because, quite honestly, I don't want to see someone other than an American win USPSA nationals. I don't care if you don't like that or not. I would like to see an American dude win nationals. I think that'd be dope.
I mean, that's a fair stance.
Yeah.
And somehow the fact that he's French just makes it worse.
Yeah, man. Send him home eating baguettes, dude. Like for your first L.
Croissants.
Like, I would love to see it. No disrespect.
Don't think it's gonna happen, but I'm with you. I
know. I hear you. I know. But I hope it happens.
Yeah. We'll
French
see.
I
people
think it'll be
send
interesting.
hate mail.
I think Christian is going to lose to Eric, but I think it's going to make it extra interesting for when they go head to head and open. So, like, I think that's going to be when Eric switches back to open for IPSC. I think that'll make it extra interesting.
I'm just super excited to see all these guys shoot, to be quite honest, man. Like, I think it's going to be super cool and very educational. Like, I'm bringing a notebook.
Eric and JJ are not on the super squad because, like, Eric hasn't shot nationals in many years, and so he doesn't earn a spot on the super squad, which is hilarious. But they're shooting on
So dumb.
some squads right after us. So like we shoot AM, PM, AM, and they're PM, AM, PM. So like whenever we're done on zone 3 or whatever, I'm gonna track back around to the other end and watch those dudes shoot for a bit for sure. Because they're gonna shoot the stages that we're gonna shoot the next day.
The same. Super Squad's got the
same rotation
as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have since we're on a sponsor squad, we have the crappy schedule this year, but at least we get to. I've never been able to watch Super Squad before, so that'll be cool. What else y'all been working on? Anything interesting?
I made some minor changes to like my posture.
Really?
Yeah, not so like straight up and down, but not like it's kind of hard to describe. Like I'm not like tactical turtle, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you're like watching this video, you'll be able to see it's like the top of my back more rounded out. So like head still upright, but top of the back more rounded out. I find that it feels a whole lot more aggressive, and I don't know. I think that I just like it. I like the amount of like aggression that comes off of that. Like it feels more aggressive, therefore I kind of am. Maybe it's just like a feeling thing, but I don't know. Like I've been doing that
So
a lot lately. And go ahead.
your shoulders are more forward or what?
Yeah, it's just like the top of my back is more rounded out like this instead of just standing straight up and down. Like if you
Oh,
watch, I don't know, Mason Lane, he's a good
Mm-hmm.
example of that. Like if you watch Christian's good example of that. I've been playing around with that quite a bit here lately. I haven't done it long enough to really like be able to articulate why I feel like that, but it's something that I've been, I don't want to say focusing on, but doing, right? Um, Maybe sometime next year I'll be able to like articulate it really well because I've spent so much time on it. But I really, really dig it. I like it.
One thing I like
Feels a
about
whole
it
lot more aggressive.
about that a lot is that it is, more similar to how your posture would probably be anyway, like aggressively on the move,
mm-hmm.
like when you're getting lower, right? And this is something I tell people all the time is like, um, I think a lot of folks are very uncomfortable shooting, in like a low wide stance, and it's because that when they do all their stand and deliver stuff, they're doing that like knees locked, like that super upright kind of posture thing, right? That's their natural shooting stance all the time. And so of course all of a sudden when I need to go move now and I get, low and wide, it's gonna feel super uncomfortable. Well, it's like, well, maybe you should just shoot that way all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that
that'll
might.
be that'll be the new normal, and it'll sort of inform, I think it's obviously more aggressive in and out of shooting positions. It takes away that need people feel like they have, like when they get into a shooting position to like stand back up again super tall. It's like, no, like you're just already in your shooting stance that you use like all the time, and it's
Mhm.
good for that for sure. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
Yeah. Cool.
That's it for me. That's all I've been
That's
working on.
it. That's all you've been
That's it.
working on.
Damn.
I know.
Mm,
All
mm.
right.
That was good. I was glad to hear about the Tim Herring class. He's coming down here to my neck of the woods in a few weeks right after Nats. I wanted to get in that class, but I am unfortunately teaching at the same time, which is always the problem these days. But
Yeah,
yeah,
pretty interesting. We shot. So he always starts and stops at class. I think most people probably like seen most of that class on YouTube. I think. But he starts and ends the class on the same stage. So like the first shots you ever do in his class are on a cold start stage, and then he takes a bunch of notes on your performance and then talks about it all kind of briefly before you start the like line shooting. But we shot that same stage like 6 times over 2 days, which is pretty interesting. Some of it was just like plugging it in. Like twice, I think we just plugged it in as like an exercise where we shot everything on the move at a walk, like at a walking pace. And so that was like not a full stage run, but we shot the same one a bunch of different times, which is kind of interesting because like I set up some smaller stages for my classes, but I try to make it different like every time. And I think I'm definitely going to take some notes from that because it's a little bit more efficient and like the people in the class still have lots of stuff to work on the same stage. And like you don't have to recreate a freaking match at your class, like we can still go back and apply this stuff because the stuff they are lacking at the beginning of the day, like probably still need to work on at the end of day one, probably still need to work on at the end of day two, like that type of thing. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to set up, kind of approach that, but it made a lot of sense and saved a lot of setup time for sure.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, sometimes you have to be different. I mean, that's how you just did a class on a big text. Great example.
Yeah,
You can't
that
necessarily
was a
set up whatever you
struggle.
want. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've worked very hard on my class stages that I use. I think it's great having a stage that designs that are really ready to go, that work like the specific things that you want to work on in class, right? Have specific points of learning built into them. Yeah, makes it a lot easier and quicker for sure. I think that's good. What else, Nick? I know you had a list of stuff, I think.
Basically making myself center the dot on basically everything, despite how it feels. And we probably don't talk a whole lot about the way you feel about things in training a whole lot.
Mhm.
But to me, it's like sometimes if it feels slow, I'm like, oh God, I should go faster on that. But like, I think what I'm figuring out with this too is like it doesn't take me any more time to center the dot at all. Like the dot, like if I get that posture that I was just talking about and like try to transition aggressively with that same exact posture, like trying to get my eyes like really really out in front of the gun, um, like I'm not seeing any extra time, on stages, like just by centering the dot and shooting as many alphas as possible. So it's just like I guess the discipline to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't it's interesting. I think that the faster you are with your vision, the slower it will feel.
For sure.
So,
Which
in other words, like, if you think about 2 different ways of engaging a target, one way is, like, your eyes snap over and land exactly in the middle of that target, and you're sitting there going, "Where is it? Where is it? Where is the dot? Where is it? Oh, cool, here it comes. Alright, great.
mm-hmm,
There it is. Almost. Okay, now." That's gonna feel
mm-hmm,
like a really slow engagement pace. Versus if you are, following it over and going, "Haba!" Like, that's gonna feel really fast and
mm-hmm,
aggressive, right? Chances are,
Mhm.
like, those 2 times in reality were the same. If not, the one where you followed the dot over was actually slower, right?
slower, for sure.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating how that perception of pace will lie to you. And that's why it's so important, I think, folks sometimes think it's an argument of semantics, but it's so important to get rid of the terminology of speeding up or slowing down and in terms and like articulating that's how you're going to approach
Mhm.
engaging things on a stage. If you're thinking about how aggressive you're going to be in terms of speeding up or slowing down, man, it's just like that perception is going to lie to you. And
Mm-hmm.
basically what you're saying is,
Yeah.
do I want to shoot more alphas or less alphas? Is like what you're actually translating that to versus like, what am I actually going to do differently? What confirmation level might I use? Like, actually come up with a specific plan on how you're going to engage that stage to give you the optimal result. But man, if you can chase that feeling of it feeling slow while you're doing it,
Yes.
but when you watch it back, it looks really quick. Like that's the zone that you want to be in for sure.
Yep.
100%.
Yep. And dude, that's what I found. Like while doing this, like I filmed all of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and while I'm doing it, I'm like, man, that felt super slow. And then I'll watch the video and I'm like, well, fuck me. That was like blazing ass fast. So let me like
Yeah.
chase the feeling of what I just did. And that's
Hmm.
basically
Mhm.
been essentially like my entire practice for nationals, like chasing that feeling of like, all right, dummy, like every transition is going to be that aggressive and you're not going to shoot until the dot is like exactly where you want it. And doing that, like it's not any slower at all. So
Yep.
pretty cool
Yeah.
Yeah.
stuff.
If not faster, a lot of the times.
Yes, I found
Yeah.
that to be very, very true a lot of the time.
And if for
Yeah.
some reason it ever is slower, like you're guaranteeing yourself to be able to harvest an alpha and not try to match a like a predetermined pace in your head and then go Charlie on it, right? Which like shouldn't probably be making up Charlies in a match, but like if you add 500ths of a second onto it or whatever it is that it's taking you, like your hit factor is just always going to be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. I have the something that Tim said. I don't know if I think actually Latham said it. It was like the time on your transition is always made on the exit, never the entry, right? Like off of a target and onto a target. He's like you have to see what you need to see on every single target, no matter what you did that was like good or bad. So sometimes you might throw the gun over and it lands perfectly right where you're looking. Cool. You can just pull the trigger. But sometimes it doesn't land perfectly. And so you've got to make a slight adjustment. He was like, but that transition speed is going to come from you calling a good shot and getting the gun off that target. But essentially just always making sure you see what you need to see on those transitions, because I think so many of us are tied to an idea of how fast we think we should be getting on that next target. Like a close target, especially, I always think that, like, okay, if I don't bring that gun over and break the shot immediately, like, I'm totally behind the curve. And in reality, like you're saying, like, you almost never are. It's just a pre made up thought in our head that we think we have to stick to, and our perception of time is so skewed, like it's not accurate at all. um yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I think with that example that you just gave, like coming off of a far target up to a close target, like a lot of the time what you'll see, people that feel that like, oh God, I need to get up to this close target because I need to shoot it fast, like that's a speed issue. Like they'll shoot one shot on the far target, and then on the second shot their eyes are starting to pull off of that target because they're thinking about going really fast on that front target. And that's when you see like drag-ons, or well, in
Mm-hmm.
that situation, drag-offs on
Drag
the
off.
far target.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely something to be like super aware of, because like you're giving up points just in the name of you know, maybe saving a couple hundredths of a second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gotta love that. I spent most of the last couple days shooting swingers mostly, which is
Nice.
good. I I've kind of come to the conclusion, like, you don't obviously have to like train swingers a lot for most of shooting, but if like you want to be really good at majors, you probably should shoot a lot of swingers. Or people give up so many points for no reason on swingers. If you like, it's funny. They even suggest to most people that you should like be trying to get two alphas on a swinger. They look at you like you're absolutely crazy. Um, but it's been good. I think that you can definitely learn some stuff from the visual side that even applies to, it makes finding a spot on a target that isn't moving like feel really easy,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously good. It's interesting. There's a lot of debates on, like the tracking versus trapping, type methodologies. Where I'm interested. I know, Brennan, we were in the same class that changed a lot of people's thoughts on that. But where I'm kind of at currently is like you need to have both.
Yes.
You need to have both situationally, um, because you are not always going to be in a situation where you can time exactly where that swinger is going to be when you're shooting it, um, and therefore be able to trap it perfectly. So, i.e., on a side exposure swinger, what if it's a situation where you have to activate it from one part of a stage and then take the next 10 seconds to shoot a bunch of other stuff, and then you come back to it? Like, are you saying you know exactly where that dwell is and that swinger is going to be? Absolutely not. I got no idea where it's going to stop, right? And so it turns into way more of a, to me, a tracking type thing. Or say that you mess up the timing on a engagement, and by the time you get back to that target, it is going away, or it's just landed. Like, what's better, taking, a shot, or maybe just nothing at the dwell and sitting there just not doing anything for 2 seconds while you're waiting for that target to come back, or trying to at least throw two on paper while it's on the way up and then it's being done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously, we all know this. We all know you're never going to be in a perfect situation all the time. But I think that some folks have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Like, okay, we're just like never gonna track swingers ever. Um, and I think there's definitely situations where at least having that in your toolbox is pretty useful. So, I've gone back to training that a good bit, and that's been pretty interesting. And
That,
Dude,
it's
one
been
thing
good.
you said there, like I've heard people say, like, nope, I only only trap targets, or
Yep.
swingers, and I'm like, how do you know where the A zone is going to come out? Like, how do you know where the center of the A zone is going to come out if you don't see the target? So, like, typically, like how I do it is like I'll catch a glimpse, like as it's coming out, catch a glimpse of where the target, like where the piece of target that I'm trying to shoot, and then trap it on the dwell. So I think I'm doing both. Like I think I'm tracking it as it's coming into view, and then on the dwell shooting it, and then like as it's on the dwell and then coming back shooting it again. It's like I'm trapping it in two spots, but in the very beginning it seems like I'm tracking it. At least that's what it feels like my eyes are doing. And like that tends
Yes,
to
well, there's
yield
a
pretty
big
solid
difference in what the
results.
gun's doing and what your eyes are doing, right? So,
Well,
like,
yeah,
for me,
the gun is behind it.
so typically, you're right, like, a good trap does require you to actually pay attention to what the swinger does when you watch it at the beginning of the stage, to see where it's gonna come out. Like, that's if you don't do that, then, like, a good trap is pretty much impossible, like, if you're up
Mm-hmm.
first or whatever.
Yep.
So typically what I would do is pay a lot of attention to where the A zone is gonna come to when the swinger comes out,
Yeah.
drive the gun to that spot, and be waiting in that spot, and then, like, 100% like what I've switched to absolutely what you're saying, when the target becomes available visually, like, my gun will stay in the trap location, but the eyes are actually switching to the A zone, and I'm just, like, watching the A zone come down and settle right on my dot, and when the 2 converge, when that shot's gonna fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds like pretty much what you're saying.
Super
Mm-hmm.
freaking hard to also be target focused if you are staring through your optic at the place that the target
Yes.
is going to end up. Like,
100%.
because you just end up looking at the dot, and then
Yep.
now now the whole thing that we talk about with the perception of not knowing exactly where your dot is on the target, now we don't know where it is on a moving target, and you're pretty much screwed. So definitely picking up the
Mhm.
target before. Yeah, you definitely have to stand in the right spot. I see new shooters make that mistake all the time with the swingers. They just want to see how fast it comes out, or
Yep.
or how fast it moves. And I'm like, no, you have to stand in the exact spot that you want to shoot it at, to watch that, and then you pay attention to that shit. And then if there's two swingers, you run over to the other place before they, activate that one and look at that one from where you want to shoot that one from. And you get a pretty good reference point that way. The thing you were talking about, Billy, with the like waiting on it and utilizing that tracking instead of always just trapping, I think also is just a stage planning exercise. Like, I think Eric would tell us that he's going to have all these contingency plans for if the swinger isn't where it needs to be, or if he missed a steal that he was trying to take or whatnot. My brain
Yep.
is not there. Like, my skill level is not there to be able to just think, okay, I missed this steal, so now that's probably going to affect it by this many seconds, and it's going to be on the upswing versus the downswing, or even just paying attention to it appropriately in my peripheral. Like, I'm not there yet. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes people do is, even if you're just going to, let's say you've got an array that includes a swinger and you're just going to post up and shoot that array, like, you're not going to leave a bunch of other stuff, understanding that swing, that 1 second swing it's got, like, if it's a 6 hit factor stage, well, that's 6 points that you watch it go away, 6 points, come back 6 points just to harvest, 1 alpha. And so, like, yeah, maybe the top guys are hitting alpha and not waiting at all, and maybe that's how we want to do it. But if there's that mistake, it's like, well, can I go alpha, track it up Charlie in a 0.75 seconds?
Mhm.
The hit factor math tells us that we can that's definitely better in that circumstance,
Right.
because I mean that's almost a mic to wait for it, like 12 points, or if it's a 7 hit
Yep.
factor stage, that is a mic of
Right.
just waiting, and then you might not get an alpha. And now,
Right.
like, you're
Yeah, yeah,
really down and add another 2 points to that or whatnot. So that's
100%.
definitely something to consider if you're, like, for me, like, the skill set is not there to just guarantee that at that level. So
Yep.
it's kind of cut your losses and go. But yeah, I definitely need to. I don't have access to a swinger anymore for practice. We need to buy one and haul it up to the range and drop it off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Very, very useful, I think. It's been good.
Have you guys shot those holy monkeys?
Yes.
Are you talking about hunting or
Did he
what?
bring one? Did he
No,
bring one to
the
nationals?
no, I
I
don't
didn't
think
see
so.
one.
Well,
Okay.
Belton
I
has
was gonna
those,
say.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they had one of those at the Space City match down in Texas that I shot, and that was the first time I ever shot that. And yeah, that was not cool. They set it up as a so, like, they had like an upside down T, so they had like 3 barrels here and then a
Yep.
double stack barrel in the middle, and so it's just
Yep.
coming out on both. I was like,
Yep.
I watched it. I was like the second and last person to shoot, and I was still looking at it and going, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
And I'm
That
like,
was
"Well,
the
where is the
thing that
first exposure? Where's the second exposure?" And I was gonna try to treat it like an over the top exposure, like one shot, and fucking no. Like I spent like 4 seconds just like trying to put around on the target. It was brutal.
that was like the swinger that like shook back and forth and went from like right to left, right? I think I saw videos of that.
No, it just
No?
it's on one
Maybe.
stand, but it comes out and does like this and like just
Oh.
goes crazy. But it's anchored in one spot. It's not like moving across, but it like comes out like kind of like a normal swinger at first, and then it goes.
Oh.
And it's like an erratic pattern that it does have a pattern, but not one that I could figure out.
It does, but like what
That's
Brennan was saying, like when they stack the barrels like that, like you cannot see it coming, and you
No.
don't know like what it's gonna do. It's like all of a sudden it'll just kind of like poke out over here, and the next time it'll just kind of like poke out up here, and you're like, where did that come from? And it's very
that
annoying. Yeah, I am not a fan of those particularly for match use anyway. Just because I feel like I don't know. I think match challenges should be things that people can train for.
mhm.
Like the skills that we're testing in a match should be things that people can train for without having to go buy some company's
Right.
specific gadget.
I literally
Yeah,
think that's
that's
the only
just
way to train that thing or to learn it.
yeah, like you have to buy one, or
Yeah.
like you have to shoot Ed Belton, I guess,
Yeah.
which kind of feels like a
that,
competitive equity thing, also. But
that
the other thing I was
sounds
gonna say on the
super gay.
swingers, yeah, one of the other thing I'll toss out for the folks that are interested in swingers. You know, Nick, you were talking about how do you trap it if you don't know where it's going to come. To me, like the most, especially at majors, like the timing of swingers is one of the more difficult parts of stage planning because you can't really figure that out in your walkthroughs. So in terms of like what can I shoot after I activate this popper, that kind of a stuff. And frankly, even if you sit there and watch it like the one time they show you, like in terms of figuring out where it comes the first time, like it's very difficult to really understand the timing of it. At the same time, noticing exactly where the target dwells and all that kind of stuff. Realistically, like what's most helpful is for at least one person in the squad to stand like right where you can shoot that swinger from and video it. Video the activation for the squad so that you can all sit back there and like watch it a few times.
Dude, that's a
From the
great
right
point.
perspective.
It's a
I
great point.
try to always do that. But that is it's less useful if you can't get like exactly where you're going to shoot it from. So if the squad kind of makes way for one person to take a video shot from that activation, to me that's the move. If you can, it's very
Billy,
important.
I feel like you've never shown me that at a match. You've never shown me a video of that at the match. Any match.
I'm talking about majors specifically
Oh,
for
I
that.
see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
More.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At locals, he keeps it to
Hey,
himself.
glad we're on the same squad for nationals then. Where's the video?
Yeah. I mean, at Go Shoot, we shoot the same swinger in the same spot every week, so we kind of know how fast they come out and where they go. To be fair,
Yes. Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
At Ohio, we had an activator that was a big piece of steel, like one of those big Colt steel or whatever, and
Gross.
it is like the kind that just is like balancing. It's not like on a hinge, right? So you hit it and it just like
Oh yeah,
spins. You know what I'm talking about?
the kind that doesn't activate half the time.
Yes. So the activation
gay.
sequences were different.
We have those to Go Shoot also.
Yeah. So like you would shoot the steel and then like
Mm-hmm.
one guy would like hit 2 targets, come back, and like the target's just coming out. It's like, oh man, that's perfect. I did it, steel, 1 target, like was transitioning to the second target and I saw the swinger like already out. I was like, damn it. I shoot the second target. There's nothing else left to shoot. I just go back and I got to wait for 1.5 seconds. And I was like, I shot it. I walked off the stage. I was like, I shot the sequence the same as you did, right? He was like, yep. I was like, was that swinger early? He was like, yep. It's like, damn.
Man.
I was just standing there. It was the last target too. There's nothing else to shoot. That's a stage
Well,
pointing arrow.
part of that too, like that was one thing I definitely noticed from Eric is like where you hit the plate also. Even if it is a hinge. And
Yes.
not only as like an unintentional byproduct, but you can actually influence how quickly the swinger activates by where you shoot the activator.
Maybe like if you shoot it at the top, make it fall faster, kind of thing.
Correct.
Yes.
Or like if
Makes
if
sense.
you need a little bit more time, you can shoot it low. Now there's a catch-22 there. Like you don't want to shoot it too low, obviously, to where it doesn't activate. But like if you shoot it at the bottom of the activation zone, theoretically that should give you the most time to do other shooting before the swinger comes out.
I'm just trying to hit the steel. Period.
I was gonna say you probably got to be pretty good at shooting to actually like use that technique, but it is useful.
There's a lot of steel at nationals. I don't know if you guys counted, but there's quite a bit. It's like almost 50 pieces of steel.
Yeah, there was
Cool.
I think 32 pieces of steel on my first national stage ever.
On a stage?
On one stage.
Golly.
Oh,
that's lame.
I feel like that makes me hate even more. It's that I don't hate for those listening.
I'm not sure that has to do with anything, but I'm glad we covered that. All right.
It just seems super lame. Like all the steel. Like that's
it was lame.
The Steel Challenge or USPSA. It's pretty gay.
Yeah. It's a good question. It's a good question. Wasn't too sure on that one myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, fellas, sounds like we're all putting some good work in, and glad to hear it. Hopefully, it pays off for us next week.
On that note.
I guess I'll see you guys in Ohio.
Yeah, man.
Sounds
good.
See
you next week.
It'll be a good time.
Thanks, y'all, for listening. All of these guys' information is down below. If you're not following them on the socials and training with these guys, look them up and hop in a class if you get a chance. Promise you won't regret it. Till next time, speed up and get your hits. Thanks.